this is about sharing ideas. This is about taking the idea of regenerative agriculture up to another level of understanding for people like me. I'm just a regular Joe, a regular person. But I believe that knowing a little bit more about this, the importance of our soil and what it means to us in the broader sense of not only food production, but nature, not only nature, but community, and in that cyclical, that cyclical economy, that's what's important for me, and I want to make sure that I get to understand a little bit more. And this is one step in that process for me, and I think hopefully for everybody else that's going to be here as well. I'm going to take just 2 more minutes. I'm going to, I suppose, explain a little bit about why CCAD. We're a local development company. Often people see us as a local development organisation and wonder why we'd be involved in this particular type of conversation. I'm going to use my hands because I'm not good with technology, but I'm going to use my hands to try to explain 3 or 4 reasons. One is back in the 80s, and maybe even earlier, at a European level, it was recognised that rural Europe was dying. Rural Europe was not competitive. Rural Europe was in a bit of trouble, socially, economically, environmentally. And one of the principles that came from that conversation was this idea of investing a little bit in the locality, to let people within the locality to come from the bottom up, to start to act on those challenges from the bottom up with a resource. So it could begin to meet the gaps that were coming from the top down. Does that make sense? The gaps that were coming from the top down. Because top-down government doesn't really, it misses some of the key challenges, whether that be about young people, older people, people in between, local job creation, infrastructure, farming, you name it. And that's what was happening. The gaps were happening, the cracks were opening. So this idea of a bottom-up process and this local development process started to build from the 1980s across Europe. And that's what we're part of. CCAD is part of that. There's 2,500 organisations like us across Europe. We've got colleagues here from, as I said, from different countries who are linked into the same, who are plugged into the same dynamic, the bottom-up, the conversation piece, the people who are driving it from within. That makes some sense, doesn't it? I hope it does, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And we're here 29 years, so the conversation has made sense. The other reason that this makes sense is that, I suppose, in the context of an operation like ourselves, I remember coming into my interview for CCAD was 29 years ago. I walked in the door, I met this group of directors, and they basically said to me, you've got to be relevant, you've got to be professional, you've got to be able to, I suppose, listen, but also we have to be able to act. We have to be relevant to that community. So we don't know what's going to come through the door. Young, old, middle, environment. So again, the hand, it's not just rural development, it's not just social inclusion, it's not just economic, social, or environmental. It's all. We have to be relevant to our community. And I would say to some of our sister companies in Europe, many are just narrowly thinking of one thing. We think of one element, but CCAD, we try to make sure that we're relevant across those sectors. So I hope that again makes some sense. And then the final part of this is about innovation. Sometimes people might think like local development organisations should sit there and basically receive some money and hand it back out. That would be like a cash machine. That would be pretty much useless to us because that's all we would be. Or if we were only looking at the public sector alone, we'd be very narrow in our thinking because the resourcing of innovation isn't just going to come from one side. And many years ago, again, I think it came from the eastern parts of the world, it was recognised that innovation wasn't just about the private sector and the academic sector, which often was the case. People thought the innovation, new thinking must come from from these academics. Isn't that the way? New thinking must come from private sector. But actually then the public sector was an investor, so they saw the third part. But what was revolutionary, I believe, was the fourth part, which was lost in lots of the conversations, was us as a collective, us as a community, us as civil society. So the 4 parts of innovation, you might have heard of this quadruple helix of innovation, was finally kind of understood. So we can't wait for innovation from above, we can't wait for it to be privatised, we can't wait for it to be researched. We have to drive some of this stuff. So that's why we're here as well. And CCAD sees itself not as a standing still. We want to be in front of and be leading and be part of these conversations. And we would have done that over many years here in East Cork and beyond into West Cork in our conversations in terms of setting up things like MINS sheds, in bringing innovation in the context of family resource centres, in bringing innovations in the context of our linkages with new communities. We don't stand still, we think different. We have to, because if we just do the cash machine thing, what are we going to do? We're going to die, aren't we? We're not going to actually be relevant. So that's why we're here. Now I'll stop talking and I'm going to start handing it over to the more practical stuff. And Katie's going to bring you through what's going to happen in the context of those conversations. I hope what I've said makes sense because it gives a platform to why we're here. Katie.
Good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome. I suppose just to kind of follow up and narrow down a bit on what Ryan was saying there, what CCAD does is extremely broad in terms of rural development, but a very kind of key part of what we do is working with the farming community, and that's quite historical. That's gone back from the very early days of CCAD. Obviously, agriculture plays a really key role in rural areas, so it's a very important aspect to our work. And I suppose how we do that, one of the ways we do that is through the Leader Rural Development Programme. We would have worked with a lot of the farming community around agri-diversification projects in particular, and training programmes, so things like artisan food businesses and food production and tourism businesses and things like that. So I think there are a couple of people here today who would have been involved in projects that we would have worked on through the Leader programme. We also run the Rural Social Scheme, so that's an employment scheme where members of the fishing and farming community can supplement their incomes through employment support programmes, and then also through building partnerships and collaborations. So that really goes from kind of the level of our board. We would have always traditionally had a very strong membership from the farming community on our board, and again, a number of them are here with us today, right up to projects like this, like the REGINA project, where we're working on a European level, where we're working with partners, learning and sharing experiences across Europe. So those partnerships and collaborations are really important. We would also work closely with networks and with organisations such as Teagasc. Again, I know we have a couple of Teagasc people here today and local authorities. So really that is a big part of our role, is to lead on those and to participate in those partnerships and collaborations. Another very key theme as such of our work is around climate, environment and sustainability. So these are just a couple of the initiatives that would be quite recent that we would have worked on. Some of them have been around longer than others. I think Wild Work 2017, would I be right? So Wild Work is part of CCAD's work, where it's a biodiversity focused programme that runs kind of slightly separately to CCAD's main work, but it's working with people to help people look after nature. So it's a really interesting initiative which you can have a look at. It has its own website if you want to look up a little bit more about what that is. Sustainable Communities, so that was a training programme that we did again as part of a European collaboration project, and that was looking at training and capacity building around building sustainable communities in South Cork and in West Cork. Then community climate coaching and leadership, so that's a programme that's running at the moment in the West Cork area, and Claudia, one of my colleagues, is here today. She's leading up on that. And then around food and drink business training, we actually have had, in particular around the sustainable food and drink business training, a very high involvement from the farming community on that project. So that was a training programme really helping businesses and farmers who were developing their food products or small retail outlets from their farm shops or anything like that, to build very sustainable businesses. So as you can see, that's just kind of a very broad snapshot there of some of the work that we've done in terms of working with the farming community. This now would have been one of our most recent projects that we delivered through the Leader programme. So this programme was run in conjunction with Birdwatch Ireland Cork branch, with Teagasc, and it was supported also then through Irish Distillers. So again, an example of the kind of collaboration that we would hope to kind of build on moving forward. So this was really, it was focused on tillage land. It was two separate projects that were looking at biodiversity on tillage land, in particular bird life on tillage land, and looking at how potentially schemes might be developed or methods that might be adopted that would support biodiversity, not just bird life, but it looked also at other areas of biodiversity as well on tillage farmland in East Cork area. And that study has actually gone on. I was just talking to Paul, who was involved in that through Birdwatch Ireland there, has gone on. It's actually had quite strong traction on a national basis in terms of the findings of that research and in terms of influencing policy moving forward. So that was a really successful project that we would have run. So just to move back then to today, so we have an agenda today that Ryan will run through with you there with the various speakers that we have, kind of interspersed with the various different speeches and talks and presentations that our panel are going to be making. We'll be giving the opportunity for discussion as well. So at 1 o'clock then we'll have lunch. It will be down in the restaurant here, so if anybody wants to stay around and come down, there'll be soup and sandwiches and tea and coffee down in the restaurant here in the hotel. So thank you very much.